Tim?
One is a professional sport and one is an amateur sport that is becoming a professional sport.
You're talking about prize money though, you're not talking about paying anyone, you're talking about giving a reward for racing. So what every Olympian is meant to be an amateur, but Mo Farah's paid. You know, the word amateur now in sport's gone. I'm sorry, television rights, there's no sport we watch on telly nowadays that is amateur. So why can't we offer a more of a reward? And if you're an amateur, I think prize money is more important because you're paying to not be done with sport. So your only reward is prize.
Tim Garton. Been very patient.
Hi,
Tim Garton. We'll get to you.
Ppora. A couple of things. Firstly, I think that the connection between the actual hunts who put on the meetings, they're the proprietors of the meetings, and the actual people who take part is getting stretched to an extreme. Assistants are in incredibly short supply and getting rare and balder by the day. So we need to, first of all, address that. I'm absolutely staggered still that for the Hunters Cert, which you can get the week before, that hunts who actually don't hold a point are allowed to receive 160 quid per animal. I actually have sent 3 in this year, 2 are below average, I've only had 1 run each, and the other one unfortunately has made more. But I picked 1 for the Fife, which has been mentioned earlier on because it was the furthest north hunt that I could find, had a nice talk to them, they struggled financially, the point to point might be a godsend. I had 1 with the 4 Barrow because they were the furthest south, had a similar conversation with a very nice Paul who was there, and similar sort of thing. He does the clerk of the course, and he does this, he does everything that's going on, and the other one with local hunt north-south. And the reason I did that, because the hunt that I actually subscribed to and hunt with decided to invite a next-door hunt who doesn't hold a point-to-point to go into its members race. So I thought, well, up you, mate, I'm not going to get, you're not going to get 3 times 160 quid out of me. And I told them that in no uncertain terms. And I told them before Christmas they should have amended the rules. So that's the one thing. The second point, so I'll be interested in some time a reply on why we still give money to hunts that don't hold point-to-points, because they can issue the hunter certificate, but all it is when it goes centrally, they don't get the money for it. That can be distributed among the hunts who do, and they take the risk. And if it's a sunny day and they make big money out of it, great. That's all for us. Coming on to why the numbers we've learned have sort of almost halved in 20 years. That's of horses, and one of the reasons is that the standards are incredibly high. I've no problem with that. I've got no problem with the 4-year-olds. I've got no problem with the flat races. But where we are totally struggling are the guys who like to ride quickly across fields out hunting, would like to have a go, but because the standard is so high, there is absolutely no race for them to go in. We need to have some more, like we said over here, scurry type races, where at least they can have a go like a flat race, and then hopefully they'll graduate, hopefully like I did when many years before the ERC, I sent a horse which I bought was a 3-day event to go from Badminton, went to Burley, never actually went to another event at all, again, because I come out of the pony club, but went point-to-pointing, and I hadn't got a clue, so I sent it to a guy who had some trained horse in there, and from that I learned, and I just do it for fun. I counted my horse this morning, which will perform tomorrow, hopefully, at Garthorpe. But it's got to be these sort of guys you've got to attract as well, because we are like a fodder, we're supplying the animals to race, and the jockeys, and the trainers, and the owners. Well, the owners wouldn't come back to pointing to race on the track. And what do we get back from the BHA? Sweet bugger all, really. They don't give us, we get a bit of levy board money, but nothing for the amount of money that we put into the sport, all the officials, the jockeys, the trainers that go through it. So the whole of the jump racing will really struggle if point-to-point flounders anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
If I could answer the first part of what Tim said about the hunt certificate and hunts that don't hold point-to-points issuing hunt certificates. This has been taken to the MFHA. I've taken it there because in this room that was said last year, and it has been listened to. They aren't for doing it. They are for putting a cap of 10 hunt certificates per hunt that don't hold a point-to-point. I know that the Cheshire 3 or 4 years ago completely went over that, which was badly looked on. Now, the answer, of which I can totally understand, if you're Mr. Jones at Farms in the middle of the Blankshire, you have your one horse, the Blankshire don't hold a point-to-point. But you know that the Blankshire want a new knacker truck or a new hunt horse. They feel that you should have the right to be able to donate your 160 quid to your hunt that you live in, that will come and collect your fallen stock or whatever. Why should you have to give that money to another hunt because your hunt can't or don't hold a point-to-point? So that is the reason at the moment the MFHA are very loath to take away the facility for a hunt that does not hold a point-to-point issuing hunter certificates.
Well, the only thing I would say there is that it's making a mountain out of a molehill. There are probably very, very few guys that are actually going to be in this position, and there are more people that the other way around. But anyway, you know, I know you've tried. I know that. Well, I'm not going to say that the MFHA bosses just sit on the fence.
Tim Sage.
Hello. Yeah, I'm West Midland area rep. Alan spoke earlier about the meeting at Newton Abbot, and I was there. Not only was there prize money down to £350, but a horse rated 80 took home a £4,800 first prize, and a horse rated 69 also took home a £4,800 first prize. So my point is that we are going to find it extraordinarily difficult to compete for the owner who wants to pay someone else to have his horse trained when he has that option. I don't know what the answer is. All I can say is that in my life I have had so much fun and so much pleasure and so much fulfillment out of training my own horse single-handedly at home, making all the decisions, where to run, everything. We can give so much fun and pleasure to people who do it all themselves. But are we reaching out enough to those people? Because we have team chasing thriving, we have more and more cross-country races like the Golden Button and the Melton Ride. These are people we should be reaching out to. These are people who could cross over to our sport, and we have so much to offer to them because we can give them so much fun. And but we have to accept that if you're a guy who thinks, I would like a racehorse and I'll pay someone else to train it and pay someone else to ride it, when they see what we have to offer compared with national hunt racing with the prize money down to those levels, we really can't compete. So we must concentrate on the people who could be doing it for fun, and I can promise them you could be having so much fun.
Thank you, Tim.
Hi, I'm Fraser Marshall, married to Charlotte from the southeast. I'm rather surprised, perhaps we are an anomaly, but a couple of people have made the point that, you know, point-to-point yards are sort of quasi-professional, and, you know, they're sort of professionally run. For my own part, I own 3 horses with Charlotte. She trains them all day. If someone were to pay me, and my children ride them, £300 for coming third, I'd be absolutely thrilled, because it does help, and it just helps maybe pay for, you know, the hay that week. So, you know, I don't really understand the point about, you know, a lot of the yards are almost professionally run. And to a lot of points that have been made, we need to encourage not those perhaps more professional yards, but as we've said, perhaps more people like us who are coming into the sport and own a couple of horses, want a couple of horses, either do it themselves or have it with another trainer. But that has to help Alan's point about, you know, more prize money. It has to encourage people in.
Practice, you want to answer that?
Could I just make a point about prize money, because I get this from across the country. I also run the combined, or have run for the final time, I hope, the combined services point where I run one of the classics. And so my prize money is 2,000 quid for the race. And interestingly, my entries last year, slightly hurt by equine flu, clearly, were 10. And the year before, which was the first time we put the prize money up to 2,000, was 14. And I did it because I was interested. Now, partly you can argue that is because top-class horses entered, so everyone else was scared off. But the prize money was down to 200 for 4th place. So it was not to be sneezed at for just the also-rans. And I might add, I think the Lady Dudley, which is the other £2,000 race in the country, has similar problems. Going on, South East actually has big crowds and makes quite big money most of the meetings, unless you get caught in a deluge of Doncaster. But the point being, I have been discussing with one of your colleagues, and he believed, I said that I very much doubted you could make much of a difference until you got prize money up to 8,000, as compared with perhaps for most fixtures 2,500. Well, without going too deeply into it, I can tell you that would get rid of the profit margin on well over 50% of the meetings. Now that might come as a shock for some areas, but that's the true reality of it for others. And the problem with doing it at Easter is a bit of a zero-sum game, is that, okay, you put up big prize money for the meetings that can afford it, and then the little ones would die. Now, you might well say survival of the fittest, great, but that wouldn't really suit me. And remember my point about that if an area dies out, you lose all the horses, so you start losing large numbers, and that's one of the problems of the South East. So prize money is tricky. The other side of it, though, I do agree, and I actually agree from my point of view, if I was after this, I've had several owners say they were really hacked off when they received a cheque for 40 quid, because that was an insult. And so I think there is an issue for getting prize money put up to a level where at least it pays the diesel or something if you come third, so 100 quid, whatever it might be. So I think there is a happy medium, if you like, because as Tim says, we can't compete at the highest levels. But if at least the owner feels that he's got something back, which pays something towards the costs of the jockey's expenses, or whatever, we're going somewhere. So I just say that. And if I may just steal a little more time, just to go back to Charlie Post's point, I earlier on supported what you were all talking about, actually, the owner-trainer bit and how we can help them. I actually was saying it's got to be opportunities for all, and that includes all minorities, and that includes actually the commercial 4-year-olds. So please do not run away from the idea that I'm anti them. I know because Charlie Brooks' great article, there is some people believe that I am. I'm not. I totally understand the economics, particularly for the trainers, and I think it's absolutely vital that we maintain point-to-point trainers, as opposed to what, if we don't do that, we will be in the line of going down Lennox's suggestion, where it just becomes third-tier racing or whatever. Whereas Charlotte has quite rightly pointed out, we're above the bottom layer of National Hunt and should want to remain there. So I am looking to ways to support you as well. So please don't run away from the idea that I'm in one side. It's got to be opportunities for all, and that's vital.
Thank you. Charlotte Fuller.
Yeah, sorry. Can I just come back on the prize money? Point-to-pointing is a very much an in-hindsight sport. We cannot put £2,000 up for a race next March or April, and it pours with rain, and the gate just doesn't even cover half the cost of putting the meeting on. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. If we all knew we were going to make 50 or get 33,000 people in through the gate every week, like the BHA, they've got a guaranteed pot. They're going to get the owners will get the money whether there's 5 in the race or 2 in the race, whether there's 14 people turning up to watch. We are totally reliant on you. We are totally reliant on spectators. And we're totally reliant on the value of our sponsors, which are getting more and more difficult to do. And all I would say is, as an owner myself, the prize money doesn't actually come into it. It's the camaraderie and the fun and the excitement of the whole game.
Thank
But
you.
it's clearly not working for everyone, though, because there is there are less horses around. And also, as well, I take your point about, sorry, just to come back to that, I take your point about, the one-off races that have got big prize money, but that doesn't entice people to come into the sport across the season necessarily, and for all racing. Also as well, I use Charing as an example. I mean, I don't know what they took on the gate, but it would have been an awful amount of money this year, and perhaps next year it rains, so they can't, but that might actually encourage hunts and or point-to-point organisations to provide for the next year from the money that they make the year before. Yeah, would make common sense, I would have thought.
Charlotte Fuller.
Oh, hi. I was just going to say, it's particularly because Len really, I think, has missed the point that there are loads of people like me. I'm sure if I asked everyone who trains their own horses at home to stand up in this room, it would be quite a few. And that's not professionally trained. And we have done both, mostly because our jockey's gone professional, so we have tried to follow her with a horse. And we have found that the cost of us having one in training and licensed national hunt training costs are probably not much different from you guys. But the cost of us having one in training was the same cost of us having 4 pointers. Because we're doing it at home, because we're doing it all ourselves, it doesn't cost what you're having to charge people. And there are still loads of us who are doing it from home on much less costs, who are not under those same sort of pressures. But there are pressures of finding races. On an aside for your prize giving thing, something that would help everyone down the line a lot would be to have a certain amount back for declaring. So rather than doing it as a prize, you've got an appearance money, and that would go for everybody.
Thank you, Charlotte. This lady in the middle here. George.
I just want to make a point on the prize money that I will quite often boycott the races with the big pots because I know that the professional yacht will probably
win them. And actually entering at a weekend, I mean, we have 4 pointers, something like that. If I enter at the weekend, you're usually spending about 200 quid on entries. So I won't target the races that I know the really good horses are going to go in. And the framing of the racing is really, really important. I want to pick out Dingley last week, where they had the 10 and over race, probably the most competitive race of the day. It was for things that hadn't won.
Hadn't won for 3 years.
Yeah, it was a fantastic race.
Yeah, it was.
You know, and we just need to do more things like that. And then going back, I have rules horses as well. In fact, I've just got my permit. So my really ordinary 5th class horse, they're going to go and run there because I can't run them pointing any longer and have the fun that I was having 25 years ago.
Sadly. Gabe?
Just as a matter of interest, the first year that Point Owners Association was in existence,
Yes.
the open race final, the prize was a new tractor by BMC. Dad got an awful rap across the knuckles from the Jockey Club for doing it, but that would be worth 60,000 in today's.
Yeah,
But that's just a point of interest.
Yes.
it's a good one though.
Richard Fuller out. Back. Richard Fuller.
Subject slightly, because we talk quite rightly about horses and things like that. And just to come back a little bit on what Tim said, we run 2 points at Barbury as the Vine and Craven, and we're going to have to drop one next year. And one of the reasons is that the Hunt Committee have said they're not prepared to back 2 points, which may or may not make money, because they don't see the relevance anymore. And since horses didn't come out qualifying, and this year, although we had a really good number of people subscribing with us, no one ever sees the horses, and that amount was halved because the rates came down, and they're not interested in 2 points. The knock-on effect of that is the course gets that much less income, and it puts the course at threat as to whether it can carry on. And I just think we need to, or the MFHA needs to address how they reconnect with hunts, because hunts provide the helpers who put the points on.
Yep.
That was my first bit, and still on resource. We always struggle to find doctors, and vets not so bad because we've got vets in the area. Doctors are a real problem. The requirements they now have to go through and the qualifications to actually come to a point-to-point. And my suggestion is that we try and get a central pool of qualified doctors, and we can phone up. And every time we've tried this, we get pushed back about GDPR and things like that. But surely there must be a way of having a central pool of suitably qualified doctors who can come and help at point.
We'll answer that straight away with Lucy. There is a central pool. Lucy, who does sterling work for us up at High Holborn.
Hi. Yeah, there is a central pool. So we're up to a standard now where the number of doctors we have are the same as they were previous to this requirement now that they have to register with the BHA. At the moment, you're right about the GDPR aspect of it, which is at the moment it's at BHA High Holborn, and we can't even release that information to the PPA on many occasions. But I think it was probably something with regard to the medical standards being rather than it being a staggered approach, it was straight in there with this registration process and so on and so forth. But I think we are now getting to a steadying level where there are doctors available. And to that end as well, the medical team over at the BHA are always on hand to help out where anyone is struggling for doctors, and they can put that message out. So with regard to that centralised pool, there is one available, and we are there to assist with that.
Thank you, Lucy. Stephen? Wait.
Thanks. Just one small point going back to, I can't remember, I think Georgie may have mentioned it about mementos and trophies. Some of the mementos that are given out by some meetings are an absolute joke. There is supposedly a minimum requirement for trophy values. Tweezerdown used to give phenomenal trophies of decanters and glasses and statuettes, which Mark Burridge sells point-to-points for. Sorry, you can buy them for about 50% of what you're actually supposed to spend, but people think you spent double. And some of the mementos are just ridiculous. So somebody in your PPA has got to get to grips with this and ensure that people, if there is going to be a rule, enforce it. If you're not going to enforce it, don't have a rule.
Simon, can I just come back on that? I have been having long conversations with Peter about this because we're not, point-to-points are not giving good enough prizes. Personally, I think a good memento is better than a £250 cheque. And I'm really pushing that we should abide by the rules that are in the book.
When I was a very young person, Jeanette took me to Burridge's, and where I visited for our own point-to-point every year, and had a terrific catalogue which Jeanette sent to every secretary, and I got through past a motion of a minimum value, and that was 25 years ago, and it hasn't altered since. So, sadly, yes.
Jo Mess. Hi.
Jo Mess.
Hi. This year we actually did give a fourth prize, monetary fourth prize. I think it was 40 quid, the cost of our entry fee, because we felt that people should at least get something back for what they've done, and that was really well received by the owners.
This is the Pychley, by the way.
And the other thing is, Peter, when could we have, please, the sort of words for these condition races and the owners, the trainers' condition races? Because I'm sure that we will soon have to produce our race cards for the planner, because I know they want to get it done early so that we can have the planner out earlier. So it's all a sort of one thing.
Absolutely. Can I answer that one?
Carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you know, we put out the discussion papers. I'm collating the information. I'm also going around all the AGMs and getting comments at the AGMs, and indeed today. That will be put to the board on the 28th of June, and then the results of that will be pushed out with justifications explaining or explanations as to why the decisions have been made promptly after that. And I expect the PPSA meeting, which is on the 9th of July, for some commentary back on it, and if there needs to be a slight adjustment maybe, which is also incidentally where the final fixture list will be thrashed out, door locked in Stratford until sorted. Which means you'll then be working quite hard. So what I can say to the fixtures is that they should be getting on with it now, and indeed the proofs have been sent out to the area secretaries, to get on with that now, but be aware that things may change. In terms of the series, which, you know, in a perfect world we'd have 8 series next year. But frankly, it isn't a perfect world, and finding the sponsors and so forth, and I apologise, I should be really starting working on this now for next season, not the season coming up. And frankly, forgive me, but the first 7 months have been quite busy. But we're getting there, and we know where we're going. And I hope to be able to announce certainly the Veterans Series, and hopefully the Owner-Trainer Series in the next couple of weeks, and I'll send out my normal whimsical, well, this time thoughts from the office rather than thoughts in the field, which will then let the fixtures get on with bidding. What I would say for anyone here who's talking to the fixtures, last year we had 5 fixtures bid for sponsors, and of those, 3 of them were begging letters. Well, I can tell you for free that sponsors don't really want to go to a point-to-point because it's so hard up that it has nothing to offer. So please put your brains together, thinking caps on, and work out what it is that makes your USP, your unique selling point, which is why a sponsor wants to come to you.
Thank you.
Yes, I understand sponsors want to pick the meeting they go to, and fair enough, they're supporting the want to. Is there any way that as part of that sponsorship we could take a small bit off each sponsorship to then divide out around the meetings that do not get national sponsors? Because there are quite a lot of meetings that never ever get a chance of a national sponsor and probably won't get one because it's not prestigious enough for that sponsor. But if we could just take a little bit off into a pot that then could be shared around all those meetings, that would help those smaller meetings to keep going. And it's just something we have discussed in our area, but as I say, it's up to you guys and if that is a possible situation to do.
Actually, Gillian, I think that's a really good idea. Funnily enough, Charlie was on the phone yesterday, you'll be glad to hear. But nevertheless, I think it is a really good idea, and we'll look at that. I mean, I think there'll be some pushback in that you would, if we're going down that route, each course would have to have all the national sponsors in their race card and so on. But we can achieve that. And so I'll definitely go away and look at that. That's an interesting idea. Thank you very much.
Back to Tim Sage's point about trying to get other people in at things like the golden button, team chasing. I think probably, I don't know, but it sounds like the license, from what other people said, the cost of getting a license now is so much more. As in, I think Tom Ellis actually was saying yesterday, it's nearly £300. And I don't know, I suppose if you want to have a go at riding in a point-to-point, then you probably, I know you can ride in a hump race, but is that not a huge cost compared to going and riding in a team chase? And sorry, can I? Well, they've got, and also, could you not have a stand or something at, say, the Golden Button, trying to encourage people? I don't know whether Go Pointing do it to try and encourage them in to have a go at pointing on their horse that they've been round the, round the Golden Button or team chasing on, because a lot of them are thoroughbreds as well. And also on novice riders races, did Martin having 19 runners in a novice riders, and I think there maybe should be a maximum field. As I'm not sure it's good for anyone.
Can I have a go at that? I mean, the novice riders, Francesco, I'll leave for another day because that's an ongoing argument. So there's the population, judging by the comments received back on the novice bit, is interestingly split straight down the middle. On half believe the novices should be reduced, another half think the whole point is the novices should be get on. So it all depends on your attitude and mind. So I'm very happy to discuss that, but we could take a long time. The rider license, interestingly, 95% of that money goes on the insurance. So we can cut it, but that cuts the insurance. So, and a lot of that insurance, interestingly, and you can argue therefore not effective for a 16-year-old, is goes on the paying their wages that they miss out on if they're laid off work, and is very important actually for some people. So, I'm very loath to do it. The good news, if there is such thing, is that the level 2 back protector, which everyone's complained about the extra cost of that, I think. Touching wood as we're still not at the end of the season yet, but the number of accidents is down and the number of back accidents is way down. And in fact, there was one very serious crash, which I suspect without a level 2, the chap might have been in serious trouble. So, and of course, so that was an extra cost in itself, but if that results in the insurance coming down or at least staying put, it will save money in the longer run. On a wider note, you'll be glad to see the insurance people are here today, Howdens, but I am talking to them about a very innovative idea whereby, if we can work out how to achieve it, whereby, and this is also about numbers of horses, where national hunt trainers or anyone else who have schoolmasters but are not willing to pay for the cost of the insurance for the riders, each individual, maybe they will take out a collective insurance which gives them 10 rides or something like that. Now, that's going to be a bit more complex for the DEX teams to work through. It's certainly more complex for my office and the insurance boys to work through, but we're looking at this as a way of sorting that out to some extent. Golden Button, absolutely. new times, but a lot of people have been talking to me about it, how we get the crossover. And clearly, a point-to-point course, and as Team Chasing Chair spoke to me the other day about it for his area, he can get 1,500 people in a day, but he can't get any crowd. We can get a crowd, but we can't get any horses. Clearly, there's a mismatch. They would like to engage to some extent with us. We would like to engage with them. The question is how you do it. Someone has suggested hunt racing, as in team racing, where you have each hunt puts in a team of 2 or 3 horses and the points score up. Now, there's clearly a whole series of issues there about stewards and. But it's interesting that people are now beginning to think outside the box. And I think that's where we need to go. You're absolutely right. That's where we need to go.
Robert Welly-Cohen.
Thank you very much.
Why were you late, Robert?
I mistook
There's
the
a good
start
excuse.
time. No excuse. I mistook the start time. I apologise, Chairman. I'd like to change the subject entirely and urge the board to actually apply for a lot more money from the levy board towards our sport. It has hardly risen for years. You've been much more subtle in how you distribute it. It doesn't automatically go to the same old courses, regardless of whether they're racing in before Christmas or racing on a key day. But the costs have gone up hugely over the years. The standards have risen. We've got more help, more costly help. And there was a moment when the levy board was very nervous about giving money to hunts, and because they felt hunting was a dirty word. Hunting is now a legal sport. Shouldn't be anybody's embarrassed about giving money to points to support them. They want these ever-rising standards, which is entirely right. They need to pay something for them. And the other thing is that we are producing an incredible number of novice jockeys who sometimes then go on to become extremely distinguished under rules. We're producing a lot of young horses who go on to be distinguished under rules. We're producing trainers who discover actually they can train and go on to become high-class professional trainers. And we're at the other end of the scale, saving the sport an enormous fortune by taking some of the older horses back into our sport. We don't get any recognition for any of that. We get a piddling amount of money. And we really need to be bold and not apply for an RPI increase, but a completely quantum leap.
Well said.
Well, could I?
Certainly, Nick.
Because in my previous role, sorry, Robert, point very well made, thank you. And this is a drum that I've been beating as hard as I can, sadly with little great effect. As a sport, we do all of those things and a hell of a lot more. If you look at the percentage that we get in terms of the overall media rights and levy that racing generates, it's pitiful. We obviously we get a very, very small sum. And if you look at other sports which racing is competing against, which is primarily football and tennis, and certainly from a betting point of view, racing is now number 3 in terms of betting turnover behind tennis and football. They put circa 5% into their grassroots. And by grassroots, we don't mean the grassroots of the professional end of the sport, but grassroots of the actual game. And in fact, I showed Peter a sign the other day from the LTA, say, come and enjoy tennis for free. So they've understood that if you get people in at the bottom end of the rung, they will get their children involved, who will then get their children involved. And that's when you get the sustainability of the sport. That, I think, point needs to be made to the BHA and the people who control the funding, is that if they fail to invest in our sport significantly, that the pain will come home to roost, not next year or the year after, but 5 and 10 years down the road. And we will be sitting here with a very diminished sport. And I think we need to harness National Hunt Racing in this, because they sometimes see us as a little bit of an enemy as opposed to a friend. They see that we're taking away some of their runners and so on and so forth. We need to work together, and we need to make a very strong case that we should be getting funding, not tomorrow or the next day, but we should be aiming for, I put a paper to the BHA that requested £1 million into our sport. If you look at Irish point-to-pointing, they get over €1 million, actually probably significantly more. But we will only get that money if we speak with a united voice. And I know Andrew here has heard me banging on about it for a long time, but if we fail to get this investment, we will pay the price. The money is there. There are a lot of people shouting for it. I know the FBOTs have reduced the levy by 17 million. It's a big hole. But we shouldn't shy away from asking for more money. So, Robert, thank you. And I think we need to work collectively to achieve that.
You'll have nothing but support from this membership. Thank you.
Could I just say on
euros per meeting from the centre.
Yeah. Could I put two contrary points? Clearly, incidentally, we did bid for a lot more money this year and didn't get it. And that's a reality that we have to work on. In my belief, remember that this grant is for racing, not for hunts. And one of the great things that was done before my time was moving the grant to differentiate between different parts of the fixture, which I know upset some. But in so doing, it demonstrated to the HPLB and the BHA that the money was very definitely for racing as opposed to the hunts. Clearly, the grant, incidentally, is less than the hours' work put in by the hunts, incidentally, in running the meetings. So there is no argument about that anymore. However, I come from Whitehall, and my experience of pots of gold is that the big beasts will crowd out the little beasts eventually. I had an extraordinary experience where they joined a couple of big events, namely Iraq and Afghanistan, into what else was done around the world. My budget for Africa was cut in with 1 month to go before the end of the or the beginning of the next financial year, from 63 million to 40 million. The same thing will happen to us if we don't get the big beasts on our side, is my belief. And to that extent, I'm afraid, Robert, I throw it back at you to some extent. This will depend on National Hunt fighting our corner for us, as well as ourselves being united. And not only did what Robert talked about there was the trainers, the horses, the jockeys, ROR aspects of it, but actually, you look round at Point in the spring when you're all thinking the racing is pretty poor. You've got a lot of kids running around. Their memory of racing when they grow up will be at a Point. They don't much like rules racing. We are creating the crowds for the future for National Hunt. So we need to get this point across because it isn't fully understood. I'm hoping, and I'll hope you'll help me do it, I want to talk to the NTF and the RCA this autumn before we put the bids in to try and get them on side and to understand fully. Individually, they all do, but I don't think it's ever really been put to them collectively to get them on side.
On the National Hunt Council for the National Trainers Federation, and we've never been asked anything about point-to-pointing. It has never been actively dismissed that anyone encourages point-to-pointing, and everyone who I have met on both the flat and National Hunt councils have been very pro-point-to-pointing. So I'd just like to put, wearing another hat there, that there isn't the enmity that it seems that has been mentioned today.
No, Lording, I get that. I think what we haven't, though, is had you collectively pushing on our behalf, and that's where I think we need to go.
I think at the moment one is struggling a little bit with our own, paddling our own canoe, and that's probably because of that. Again, with the £850 down to eighth, prize money, I think because of that, yes, maybe one hasn't looked towards point-to-pointing because one's trying to keep one's own boat afloat.
Sure, I'm not blaming anyone. I just think that's what we need to just focus in on.
Excellent.
Yes, Andrew.
I agree completely with Robert and everything that's said, but the fact is that jump racing does not consider point-to-point as being basically grassroots jump racing. Grassroots jump racing is journeyman jockeys, journeyman trainers, stable staff in the licensed group, and that's something we're trying very hard to get through. I am heavily conflicted in all these things, unfortunately. Won't be for very much longer, fortunately. But there is, I don't think it's about hunting, Robert. I don't think there is any feeling that the levy should be reduced because it's sort of being siphoned off to hunting. But the fact is there is an unholy struggle going on between the three parts of racing, being the racecourses, the horsemen and the BHA. as to where this money goes. And you will have seen this last couple of weeks, because the levy board apparently is quite incapable of forecasting its revenues. There's a massive hole in the first quarter's revenue from the levy. So we are trying very hard, and Peter and I have been trying hard. But I mean, I'm being slightly indiscreet, but a very senior member of the RCA said to me in a meeting the other day, I don't really recognise any reason why point-to-pointing should get money that would be either coming to racecourse prize money. And that, I worked very hard on it for the next hour or so. We have to do a lot more. But we are struggling against a unholy scrabble for money throughout the entire sport. And surprise, surprise, we are quite a long way down the pecking order. And it's not simply point-to-pointing. There are a lot of other people who've been have been shortchanged on the levy. Next year, we're back, because the racing authority is no longer going to be set up, we are back to the old levy process. So I think there is a better chance of our case being heard. And I know, Peter, you have done a lot of work already trying to prepare ourselves for this year.
Thank you, Andrew. Ilona.
Andrew, I would just like to explain I am very conflicted as well. Obviously, I have an incredible passion about point-to-pointing, and I run a National Hunt rules track. I would just like to explain about the levy, whether you all realise that is actually, it's run by bookmakers, and it is profit from the bookmaking industry and gambling on horse racing at professional tracks. And whilst I am a huge fan of point-to-pointing, and whilst horses come up and down through point-to-pointing, the levy is not generated at any point-to-point track as such, and it is run by bookmakers who look at things in very black and white. And they look at where does their income come from. It comes from race courses. What do they want to happen on a race course? They want to have 8 runners in every race to maximise the field. Tonight I've got a Hunter Chase fixture on, and 4 weeks ago when I watched Fontwell, I felt for them enormously. 4 and 3 runners, they put on fantastic prize money. You're all talking about prize money and running at point to points. Look at that course. They put on amazing prize money there, and it was so poorly supported. I was terrified about tonight. If we had had 3 and 4 runners, this meeting would be in jeopardy next year. I'm delighted to see that you have actually supported it. We put on the richest prize offering for a Hunter Chase meeting. We've got over £80,000 on tonight. Why have I not got maximum fields tonight when you're all crying about point-to-pointing and prize money? You know, there aren't enough horses, I know, but there are plenty of horses to run at Garthorpe tomorrow, and there's plenty of horses at other meetings. You know, there's more entries at Garthorpe tomorrow than there have been at other meetings. So really, you know, we do all need to work together on this, and I fully appreciate you were coming from, but you do need to see it from our point of view as well.
Please. Julian? I've had a lot of comments in the Yorkshire area that the point-to-point people who want to better themselves and who want to go in hunter chasing have been penalised this year because the BHA insist on them all having these nasal swabs and everything, which costs well over £100 to get. The trouble is you've got to do it at a certain time, so when hunter chases have been reopened, it's too late to enter because you can't get the nasal swab. And it is killing the point-to-point people who want to then go on and do hunter chasing. And I think that I would like to ask the BHA if they are intending on carrying that on next year, because I think it will be a sad way for hunter chasing to go, because people just can't afford that type of thing, especially when national hunt trainers are not paying that.
Yeah, we do need to know.
Sorry. I agree with you. Hopefully, I spoke to David Sykes yesterday. Hopefully we won't have to next year. But the fact is, I don't know if you've read page 14 of the Racing Post. The fact is, there is still an increase, a weekly increase in cases of this particular equine flu in the non-thoroughbred herd, as it's described, i.e. the non-licensed herd, which is the sort of vet speak. And it isn't, of course, the BHA who's making the decision. It is the BHA's veterinary committee, which is an independent veterinary committee, including all the knobs from Animal Health Trust and Smart Vet. So this is, if we, as point-to-pointing, and anyone who knows me knows where my true love lies, but if we introduce a couple of horses into the thoroughbred licensed herd, and we then see Cheltenham or Aintree cancelled as a result, or indeed Ascot perhaps now, we will probably suffer some significant consequences. And in fairness, there was a lot of effort I put into trying to, I think the alternative to the swabbing for hunter chases or non-licensed horses going into racecourses without a swab, is that they would have said, well, for this season there will be no hunter chasing, which would have been much worse, I think. So, but I mean, sorry? It was found at licensed trainers' yard, but because of the various actions that were taken, but it had obviously come from not from horses outside that yard. I mean, I'm not an expert on how it came. You go. But it is, I hope next year, I mean, that it won't.
Let's hope so.
It's a minor point, but one does think that next Tuesday at Ascot Sales, no nasal swabs are having to be taken. What's happening 2 weeks later? The best flat racing meeting in the world is happening at Royal Ascot, and the horses going in there beforehand don't have to do nasal swabs. Looks like I'm wrong then.
Right, now, ladies and gentlemen, I've got to wind this up because it's 5 to 1. And I've got some thank yous we must do. The sponsors, there's a long list. I'll whiz through them, and that shouldn't take away the importance of them. But our thanks to our point-to-point sponsors: Tats Ireland, Equestrian Art International, Point-to-Point Racing Company, Nimrod Veterinary Products, Three Counties Equine Hospital, Cottage Field Stables, Prince Concern, Rowley Racing, Dunraven Stud, Fran, Nimmo, Charlie Post, good luck with your wedding, Sydney Phillips, that's the company, Howden Insurance, Harley Racing, Treehouse Sporting Colours, Bayliss Horse Feeds, who are promised to do more, MFHA, Stratford Racecourse, Cynthia Higgin, bless her. How many years have you been supporting us? 30? More. More. Bless your heart. Michael Bannister and the Jockey Club. Thanks also Tessa Jenkins for work, voluntary work throughout the year, and the pair of them with Catherine Smith, neither of them here, checking membership and organising, coordinating today's lunch. Stratford for the 42nd year, Ilona and Wendy, great thanks to you, and in particular. Fixture secretaries, Stephen, thanks for your contribution today on the board, and thank you for promising to come back again next year. But your secretaries, we couldn't be without them for our membership and for hosting all our PPR races. Thank you to the rest of the panel. You must admit they've stood their ground well and answered most of the questions where they could. Alan, thank you. David and Peter. You haven't said much, but we'll all take it home, no doubt. Round of applause for our panel, please. Thank you all for your participation. This annual lunch of ours is a celebration of winning horses and riders, and let's go and have a party.